Please arouse the attitude of bodhicitta as you listen. His Holiness is now continuing with the instructions on developing the two types of bodhicitta according to the founders of the two traditions, which is one of the 100 short instructions by Mikyo Dorje. This part that he is talking about, that he is giving the transition for now, is a meditation on combining all the aspects of karmic cause and effect. This part says, in brief, it talks about having we cling to our bodies, and we clothe them and give them as good food as we can. There's so many different feelings in our mind. We think of so many different things that there's nothing we have not done or will not do. We cling to our relatives and food and clothing as ourselves. From beginningless time, we have gone from samsara to samsara, from lower realm to lower realm. We do not know ourselves, and we have been, and there is no opportunity for us to free ourselves from the prison of samsara. So we must not deceive ourselves. From fear of our life being impermanent, we must, realizing that we have no time to procrastinate, we must contemplate how karmic cause and effect is unfailing. Let's listen to the instructions and remove our doubts, gain definite decisiveness through contemplation, and experience through meditation. If we have a thought of clinging to ourselves, we think, you have been deceiving me from the beginning of time. There's nothing you have not deceived me, and no way that you have not ruined me. And now we will see who wins or loses, and then try to completely eliminate your cherishing yourself. Thinking in this way, you supplicate the gurus and meditate upon Guru Yoga. It should make you certainty in the relative interdependence, and gain certainty in the relative interdependence in karmic cause and effect. Now His Holiness has moved on to the next part of the instructions, which is the contemplation of the defects of samsara. First is thinking about the suffering of suffering. This portion is describing the different sufferings in the different types of realms. Describing the different types of hells, the names of the different hells from the incessant hell and so forth. The names of the 8 hot hells, the 8 cold hells, the neighboring hells, and the occasional hells as well. In these, there's not even a moment opportunity for happiness. There's not even the slightest moment opportunity for happiness. And the suffering that we experience as humans is not even the tiniest fraction of the suffering in the hells. This section of the text is describing the lifespans in the hells, the least of which is millions of human years long. Now it's describing the length of lifetime in the lower realms, which if you have a cartload full of 80 bushels of sesame seeds and you take one seed away every 100 years, the length of time that it would take to empty the cart is the length of the lifetime in the least of the cold hells. Thinking about how this is caused by acts that are come out of strong anger, and so we must do everything we can to give up all of our misdeeds that are motivated by anger and hatred. Now is a description of the sufferings of the hungry ghosts. Are those whose stomachs cannot be filled, who cannot lift themselves up with their legs. Are also those who are able to find any food, or if they do make great effort and happen to find something, the moment they eat or drink any food or drink it, it's as if they have eaten or drunk fire or lava. Now it's describing the suffering of the animals of different sizes who mostly spend their time eating one another, or they're caught on hooks, pierced by hooks, or forced to plow fields and so forth, or their milk is taken, or their spring is taken. If you're born into these three lower realms, not only do you have the suffering of each place, you have the addition of individual sufferings. Thinking about the suffering, think about how we have achieved the precious human body with its pleasures and resources now. Contemplating all this, again, meditate upon Guru Yoga while reciting a supplication. The next of these is the contemplation of the suffering of change. We look at all the pleasures in samsara. We see that they are all temporary experiences. We may be born through doing some of the lesser virtues. We may be born in the higher realms. But from the moment we are born, we have to look for a life. We have to guard what we have. We encounter enemies. We are parted from those we love. And we experience incredible suffering because of our desires, hatreds, and jealousies. There are many different sufferings that we experience in all of the three different higher realms, which are all described here. The suffering when you were born as a god, the suffering of dying is 16 times greater than even the greatest suffering of the lower realms. And once again, it's visualizing the gurus and supplicating them to realize this. Next is the contemplation on the all-pervasive suffering of formation. This talks about how all of the higher realms are impermanent and will all come to an end. Everything is changing from moment to moment. Even if one achieves the high states of the jhana meditations, that continuum of that meditation will be lost, and it is impermanent self. ，even if we were to become a universal emperor, we would in the next lifetime fall and become a slave or worse. All of these, no matter how great the sufferings of nirvana, no matter how great the suffering of samsara, in the end they will change and become suffering. So meditate upon this until you lose all attraction for samsara. Meditate upon these until you have the wish to achieve the great enlightenment. The next section is thinking about the way to flee the suffering of samsara in the future. It's considering all the various sufferings of samsara and wishing to flee from them. Like a bird fleeing from a frozen lake, like a great captain fleeing from the island of demons. Thinking of yourself as like a ferryman who can carry, thinking of the three vows as like a ferryman who could carry you across the river. You are very careful of even the slightest infractions of your vows. This is making supplicate to develop compassion, to free yourself from the ocean of samsara suffering, and to achieve the level of omniscience. Next is the 32nd section, the practice that is necessary for all of the four common preliminaries. Think to yourself that you need to eliminate yourself from the terrors of samsara. Develop great fear for samsara, great compassion, clear compassion for all sentient beings, and devotion, fervent devotion for the Guru. The desire to abandon samsara, and the wish to achieve liberation. So this year, now these instructions on the two types of bodhicitta. I would like to finish this section, but if I just read it all, there's not a whole lot of benefit to it. But in generally, But in terms of before we meditate upon the actual practice of the two bodhicittas, we need to meditate upon on the four preliminary practices, and so these practices are explained in great detail. And so, for that reason, up to this point, if we think about the karmic cause and effect, it does talk about it talks about the clinging to ourselves and our possessions. If we talk about that, from beginningless time, we have grasped at our five aggregates as being ourselves. And we've clung in this way since beginning of summer, and we grasp at the five aggregates as being ourselves. And we think about my body and my mind. And so then, because that, we attach to that. And so in order to support our body, and in order to adorn our body, we do various unvirtuous things. And when we think about my mind, experiences many different types of feelings. It thinks about many different things, and you think about my relatives, my food, my wealth, and then the land that I owned and so forth. We do not recognize those who have been our kind parents from beginningless samsara. We do not recognize that they have been samsara, that they've been our parents. And this is a cause of ruin. Or we've brought much ruin, or we've had much bad karma because of this. And so, generally, in our thoughts, we grasp at the me as being a self. And we think that we're really smart, that we're actually qualified or skilled in something. But actually, it's like we're actually have just shut ourselves in a prison. And how is it that we've put ourselves in prison? If you put a person in prison, they've done some criminal act and they're put in prison, then what they do not have the same prayer as before. If they want to do something, they can't. They're unable to do it. If they think they want to go someplace, they do not have the freedom to go there. They're separated from the outside world and have to stay in a very small place. The people that they see, other than just a few of their friends or their relatives or parents, they have no opportunity to meet anyone. And so, similarly, it's like that. And so because of clinging to ourselves and to me and mine, we have shut ourselves in prison. And in this, we put ourselves in that prison. And who's put you in prison? It's ourselves. The person who's put in prison ourselves. So we put ourselves in prison. Once we're in prison, then we only allow a few of our friends and friends and family into our environment, and we make no connection with anyone else. And so, in the similar, we are in that iron prison, that iron cage of ego clinging. We're in the prison of ego clinging. The person who's put us in the prison in the beginning is ourselves. Normally, when we think about if we go into jail, we realize that we're going to jail. Normally, we don't want to go to jail. We have no wish to go to jail. And once we're in jail, we think if we have the suffering of thinking and the suffering and sorrow of being in a prison. So right now we are in prison, but we do not understand that we are in prison. And so this world that we're in this world, seeing the world as a prison, is the greatest prison there could be, and this is the worst thing in samsara. And so we need to free ourselves from this. So how can we free ourselves? If we think about it from one aspect, we can liberate ourselves from the suffering of clinging to me and mine through our compassion for other sentient beings. For example, to tell a story. There were some parents who had only one child. And that one child so they only had one child, and that one child made a mistake and was put into prison. And when he was in prison, the parents had no one to care for them or no one to visit them. And they experienced great suffering in their minds, thinking that their son had been put into prison. And then eventually they had to be brought to a hospital because of that suffering. And when that suffering occurred, they needed a helper, someone to nurse them through that. Other than their child, they had no one. And so, because of that, that person needed to escape from the prison at any way possible, to escape or free himself from the parents, free himself from prison, in order to go and protect us and help his parents. Similarly, we ourselves, there are all the parents who are experiencing, all of our parents who have protected us so kindly and given us unrepayable kindness since the beginning of this time, now lack any protector, no helper, no friends, and some stuff. It's as if they're waiting for us. But the situation that's happened now is because we have made it as if our parents are outside the prison with no outside of ourselves, and so we need to destroy this prison of ego clinging. And so we are within that prison of ego clinging. So but our parents are all waiting for us outside, and so we need to escape this prison. So we need to understand how is it that we put ourselves into this prison. How is it that we work for self-ashamed and cherish ourselves? We need to think about those. We think about our dear former parents, all the beings who've cared for us with kindness. I think that we should have no suffering. And if we continue to have no compassion and be selfish and act for our own aims, then this is not at all appropriate, and we must give that up and do whatever we can to eliminate or to escape this prison of samsara. Then following this, there's the contemplations of the defects of samsara. But basically, these four common preliminaries: the human life, the death and impermanence, the contemplation of karmic cause and effect, and the contemplation of the sufferings of samsara are extremely important. In the past, when you did the practice of the Karmapa tradition, and what it says in the Karmapa scriptures is that you should develop the feeling of warmth, the signs of warmth from practice, from one dharma. And if you do not do that, then you will not have any benefit. For example, if you're receiving on the precious human body, then you must do that until you have the signs of warmth. And if you do that, and before you move on to the next practice. But if you do not, if you meditate all the time in this life, if you practice all this life and not go any further than that, if that person should die there, then they said that that's no problem, that it's no problem. That once you then should continue in your next lifetime until you achieve the appropriate level of understanding. Make that aspiration before you die, that you will in the future be able to practice until you achieve the appropriate level of understanding. Now this is a very strict form of practice. Or if you could even say, if you talk about it in a bad way, you could say it's a narrow way of practice. But in any case, what that means is that when we do the practice we need to do the practices. And sometimes we do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. We do a little bit of this and everything, but we never have any results from it. We do a little bit of practice, but it never happens. We meditate a little on the precious human body, but that we need to really achieve a certain level with that practice. We need to gain stability into that, and then after that, then we need to meditate upon. We need to meditate on death and impermanence and so forth. But what some lamas said, but if we did that, some lamas say we do not need to do only one practice for an entire life. Because some people may not be able to achieve the real capacity of the meditation of the precious human body, but they're able to meditate upon death and impermanence, or they may be able to practice on karmic cause and effect, or upon the suffering of samsara. But there are different people with different faculties and different interests, and so for that reason you should meditate on what works, they say. It's not that you absolutely have to practice first and practice the precious human body and so forth. But basically, we really need to practice something until we get some stability in that Buddhism. We can do a little bit of all the different practices, but if we achieve no stability in none and no confidence in any, then it's rather strange. And so then at the time, there was something that we'd have to regret. We think that we've done many different things. We've done many things, but I've really accomplished. You can't say that's anything you accomplish. And then if that happens, so that at that time of death your mind is filled with regrets, then that's not good. So whatever practice it is you do, you need to achieve stability in that. And so it is important to practice in that way. And whatever practice that we do, we need to see whatever fits your interest best, or whatever is best. That's these days we talk about practicing the ones that you have the greatest interest in. Think about these four preliminaries. I think that we all have to practice, but the order is not necessarily definite. Because sometimes people have a great interest in meditating on death and impermanence. They have a lot of excitement about meditating on death and impermanence. And then, because of their practice of death and impermanence, they're able to develop they'll have a particular feeling in the practice of contemplating the human body, or be able to automatically understand it. So it's like and then each of the different practices help each other. The practice of the practice of death and impermanence helps the practice of the human body, and so forth. And so these are called the four preliminaries, but it's not that but that doesn't mean that once we've done the preliminaries, once we get to the actual practice, we need to stop practicing and give them up. It doesn't mean that. When we say that they're preliminaries, that means that they need to precede our practice, the main practice. In order to practice the Dharma, they're like the foundation. These are the foundation. They are indispensable for your practice. They're extremely important at the beginning in the actual practice and at the end. And so the meaning of preliminaries is that they're important from the very beginning as the foundations. And some, if we think of them, if we do them practice a little bit at the beginning, and then after that we give them up, that's not how they are. And so the reason for calling them preliminaries is because they're the dharma that have to precede all the practice that we have to do. They're the foundation of all these. Now, when we were debating, sometimes when we talk about, when we think taking something as the basis, then we say, I was taking this as taking this as a given. And so that's like from the beginning to the end. I'm taking this as the basis. I'm taking this as taking this as a given. So basically, you have to take that these are something that you have to take as a given. You should not say that these are taken a given as a practice. Basically, if you do not have a good practice of the 4 preliminaries, then the actual practice will not go well. And so what the other lamas of the past have said, if you as it is said, if you have not meditated on death and impermanence, then Guhya Samaja is not profound. So whether something is profound or not, it depends upon how much benefit it brings you in your mind. When you talk about medicine as being profound or not, it's when we talk. Also, it's a question of so it's a question of how beneficial it is. The more beneficial it is, the more profound it is. And so if you have not understood death and impermanence, then Guhya Samaja is not impermanent. If you have understood death and impermanence, then the 3 lines of going for refuge are profound. And the reason it's profound is that is because you have a stable attitude, a stable interest because of your contemplation of death and impermanence, and this benefits your practice. And your practice will become more meaningful. And so it is very important to understand in these ways. Otherwise, we sometimes... there was once a Lama who once asked me something. He said, Sarvavid, Sarvavid is a practice we do. The practice of Sarvavid to purify the pure, purify the lorums. And the Lama asked, is this a Mahayana Dharma or a great vehicle Dharma or the foundation of Dharma? And the Lama is asking this. And the Lama was asked this question. He said, if it's practiced as the great vehicle Mahayana, then it is Mahayana practice. If you practice as the Hinayana, it's a Hinayana practice. But actually, it's neither than it. Many people think that. If we think about the entering the middle way, it's a text on the middle way, the Madhyamaka. So we think that I'm studying the middle way. I'm practicing the middle way. However, but it's they're mainly saying this because the text that they're studying is a middle way text. But the question of whether they're Madhyamaka scholars or whether they have a Madhyamaka view depends upon themselves. We have to look at it within ourselves. Whether we have really engaged or entered the view of the middle way depends upon something about ourselves. We have to look at ourselves. There's the Madhyamaka of the words and meanings, and the Madhyamaka of the words is in the books, but the Madhyamaka of the meaning is something we have to examine ourselves to see if we have. However, many people study the text, entering the middle way, and as they do, then their envy gets stronger. And when we talk about the middle way, then there are differences between the different schools, and so when people study the middle way, then they often get a lot of attachment, and they say that and they get sort of envy or grudges in between the different schools, between the different philosophical schools. Now, by looking at the, if we have this clinging, clinging to the, clinging to mine, to my school, and we have that clinging to truth, then basically our clinging to truth and our clinging to the self grows stronger and stronger, and then that is not really the middle way, is it? And so for this reason, the Dharma that we practice, if we think that I don't have to do anything, and the Dharma that I practice is middle way, is the great vehicle Mahayana Dharma. So I'm doing the practice in this. Sometimes monks are kind of look down upon lay people. They think, oh, those lay people are doing, they're just lay people. They're not able to do as much. And if they're meditating, they say, oh, there's nothing surprising about that. If they say, oh, what's surprising about them meditating? Even non-Buddhists even meditate. But the meditations of the non-Buddhists are not that easy. They've achieved the non-Buddhists often achieve the levels of jhana. We say about but we often look at the meditation and say, even the Madhyamakas have them. Before we're going to be able to not be, before we should be unimpressed with the non-Buddhist meditations, we have to have that meditation ourselves. But then we instead pretend, puff ourselves up, and we say, oh, that's nothing like that. And we say, oh, that the Hinayana has that. But even that, and what this means is that, or what this shows is that we do not have any practice in our beings. If we have a practice of Madhyamaka or Dzogpa Chenpo, then we think we end up having regard part of may think that, oh, I'm practicing the Mahamudra, the great vehicle, or the great seal, or the great perfection. But actually, if we get proud about this, then this is a sign that we do not really have the Dharma. We do not really have any practice. And so for that reason, Gyawa Yangomba once said, the Dharma being the great perfection does not help. The individual has to be the Karmadurja. The Dharma is, of course, great perfection, but that the individual has to be the great perfection as well. In this way, the preliminaries, when talking about whether our the actual practice becomes profound and beneficial, then depends upon how good our preliminary practice is. Sometimes we think the preliminary is a kind of a lower meaning. We think about that the preliminaries have a lesser value, and think that they have lesser value and are not able to perform all the purposes that the actual practice is. But that is not true, not necessarily true. So, but they absolutely must have them beforehand. Now, a lot of people, when they think about doing the preliminaries, they immediately think about prostrations and doing Vajrasattva and Mandala and so forth. But those are very important, of course. But there's even more foundation, more preliminary, foundational practice is the meditation on the four thoughts that turn the mind. So these four common preliminaries are that foundation. And we must let's really have a real stable practice, a real practice that we feel confidence in the preliminaries. And until that, we shouldn't move on. And only once we have like a foundation, a stable once we have that stable foundation of these, then, like if you're building a house, if you're going to build a good foundation, a really strong, good foundation, then you can build a building that's 20 or 30 stairs in it. So if you want to build a big 30-story building, then you have to make a really strong foundation. If you do not, then there's no way you can actually build a tall building. And so in order that it's important for us to develop this really strong foundation in the preliminary practices. sit on the 13th. So on the 14th, 15th, and 16th, for the course of 4 days, we will have a conference on the jewel ornament of liberation. And so since we're having the topic of this conference is as described in the summary versus the 6 topics: the cause, the Buddha nature, the support, the precious human body, and the spiritual master, the conditions. So these will be discussing about these 3, and then in the future we'll continue these. And it'll probably take us 3 years to go through the whole entire text. And through doing the discussion of this text, I think this is something that we'll be able to serve the teachings of the unparalleled Doppelkaju through this. And we will be able to remember the kindness and repay the kindness of the incomparable Karmapa. So that's my hope or my aspiration for this. Generally, in Tibetan, whatever with all the traditions, we need to have faith and devotion in all the religious religions. They're all traditions that can protect beings from samsara, and so we should view them all in the same way. We should have, and it is important for us to train in pure view and a pure perception of all of them. But because of our own aspirations and karmic, we have entered the tradition of the Karmakaju. And so for us to have this conference on the jewel ornament of liberation by the peerless Karmapa, in terms of the Doppelkaju tradition, is one of our greatest responsibilities, one of the greatest things we can do. And so please all focus your attention on this a little bit. The presenters at the conference have been come to Utah, and they have put a lot of hard work into preparing. And they have done a lot of discussion and preparation and discussed their different views. As well as a lot of research. And so when the conference begins, it should not just be those 9 people, but basically all of the kempos and masters and teachers, as well as all of the many people. So I think if we now begin to take some interest in it, and if we then, in order for the teaching to become like a real ornament of the teachings, then it's important for us to take interest in it now. Now this conference, if we now while I was in Utah, I asked the conference presenters we should make every effort to look at every single word of these. But in order to do this, we first need to have the lung, the transmission of the jewel ornament of liberation. We need someone who's more better than normal for that, but because there's no choice, it ended up that I had to give the lung, the transmission. And so it's like as if we had to go. There's no point. It's like we had to walk on our knees to do it. There's no way to do it, but to normally we walk on our. So I don't really know anything, but sometimes I have to pretend as if I do, and so I had to recite the transition of this. Now we aren't going to do of this, but this year but I gave the transition for the points up as far as we are doing this year, giving this year. And when I was thinking about this transmission, if I only give it to those who have the, if I give it only to the conference presenters, then it would not go for everyone who's participating in the present. So I think it's probably good to uh, give the transmission to everyone who's participating in the conference all together. And so for that reason, so to see if there's some way to arrange it before, while all of these, while everyone is still here. And sometimes I see some of the presenters. Sometimes I see them put it together. Sometimes I see a few of them, but I rarely see them all together. And so I'm wondering where they're. But they're actually all they're probably all gathering and preparing for this. I think most of them are probably here. Some of my favorite tomorrow before the conference. They should go down to the go down to the go to the go to the Baja Bodhi temple and offer some robes and alms bowls and contemplate how this is something that will bring meaning to your life, something that will benefit Buddhist teachings in general, and in particular, the cause for you to become a great being who can uphold the teachings in the future. And think about how when Gampopo in the past previous life was the Bodhisattva youthful moon that made the aspiration that he would be the one who would uphold the teachings of the King of Samadhi. Samadhi then became, when he was Gampopa, was then able to spread the teachings of Mahamudra in the land of Tibet. And so that the meaning of this make the aspiration that we'd be able to uphold the meaning of this teaching, the stages of the practice of the beings for the three people, and I think this would be a good thing to do. However, they're scholars only, so I don't know. They might have other presents, so I don't need to talk too much about this. So I haven't much else to say. Now, yesterday, we talked about the two topics for the Western style debates, and these two topics are whether the Shentong view and whether practice is primary. So, wondering, are you preparing for these things? Now, in the past, when we prepared, I helped out a little bit, but as I said last year I said that we wouldn't have to. Last year we said it. The third time we tried to have it 3 times. I cancelled it 3 times actually. I think first we tried to set it up and it wouldn't work, and I cancelled it. And the second time we hit it, I thought it wouldn't work and we cancelled it. And then the last time was like, if we don't do it, it would be okay. So the last time we did it, and that final time, we gathered both the proponents and the opponents together and told them, okay, you make this answer and this one, and opponents say, you should say this and you should give this answer. But if we did that this year, this would not work. So in this way, you probably need to look at some texts for this. You probably need to look at some basic texts about whether the Shentong view is correct or not. And the topic of whether the practice is more important than study or not. You can just study it. Will do what I can. Now I do have a few texts to myself, and if you need to see them, and you come to me, then I might, then I will give them to you. But if you do not say that you need them, then I won't know. What It's difficult to know what needs to be prepared or what not. So actually, your kempos have probably given you direction, so you probably do not need to worry about this too much. And so for me to, it's not just like we think, but sometimes I get a little bit worried about things, and so I get a little bit uncomfortable at how things are going to. When we are doing the actually, I need to, if I do not give an introduction to how the Western style debate should go, then you will not know how to do it. So I need to go to such to how many you can talk and so forth. It is important for everyone to understand how many minutes that the procedures. Then it's very important. And so, and if I do not say this directly, then there's not a whole lot of time to prepare. So like there's actually a bad example. So I won't say that. So everyone, please keep this in mind.